Here he is, our Tuesday regular from the Province and Post Media, the one and only Mr. Patrick Johnston. How are you?
I mean, if we're talking about basketball in Canada, come on. Let's talk about Major League Baseball. None of this is happening. It's not happening. Don't talk about it. Come on.
Probably not. No.
Get real. It's the
tried to
40th
talk
anniversary. 40th anniversary of BC Place, and BC Place was originally partly maybe they put a baseball team in there, but it was a disastrous design to begin with. No, the basketball's not coming back. Baseball's not happening. Let's not talk about this. Not here anyway.
Well, they're not equitable. Baseball needs an actual stadium.
Mm-hmm.
At least you have the venue for the NBA team, theoretically. Come on. Yeah.
You don't have an owner who wants to pay for that.
You're earning visual scorn from Matt right now.
I know.
Wake
he's
up
so
on the-
annoyed. He's so annoyed.
Wrong side of the web this morning, Patrick?
No, I just fired up. You gave me something to get fired up about. It's not. There's not a lot to get fired up about these days. I mean, okay, we're gonna talk draft, and that's interesting. But
we aim to evoke motion. That's we've reached our goal. Then
we'll put you down for no, and we'll carry merrily along. All right.
No, for the video. Crossing my arms. Big no. X.
What's up with the Russians? We know Podkolzin and Kuzmenko are not going back to Russia this summer, which is wise. What are they up to?
Well, I mean, we know Kuzi's been on this world tour. You wonder about how the team feels about that, but yeah.
Where's he been? What are you talking about?
Let me know if we snooping on his Instagram. We know he went to Georgia, which is next to Russia. We know he went to Brazil. He was in Bali at one point. I think he was in Colombia. Or was it Venezuela? Wow. Anyway, he's been all. It was incredible. It's a dream. The guy loves the outdoors. He literally said that was part of the reason he liked Vancouver. He's a guy that's interested in things. He likes going and seeing the world. Got his contract, and let's go see everything we can.
The good news is because of the Canucks' lack of playoff participation, the offseason is long, and he's got more than enough time to go travel the world and maintain some level of...
You can't possibly train all summer.
You can't.
So good for him.
Hey, JT Miller's using these extended summers to see if he can qualify for a U.S. Open. That is something constructive. It's competitive.
Yes.
Might not be the most cardio, but it's constructive at the very least. Okay, let's move on.
I've seen how much you swing the club, Matt, per round. That's got to be exhausting.
Oh, wow.
Patrick, I beat him by a stroke Friday at Northlands, and that was with making a 9 on 18. So how bad am I?
Apparently,
9. One stroke better than 9? Him. I close with a 9 often on the 18th hole. This Northlands. Yeah, it's a horrible hole. Jeez. I hate it. I always choke,
don't play.
And yet I still beat Blake.
I was putting with a weed whacker all day. So,
right. It was an equipment.
Well, that would just be nice, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. He just I just out equipmented him apparently on Friday. The Canucks have taken 4 players to dinner at the NHL Combine, we have been told. Zach Benson, who's a local kid, a winger with the Winnipeg Ice. Nate Danielson, who's a strapping centerman with the Brandon Wheat Kings. Tom Wielander, a Swedish right shot defenseman. And Colby Barlow, who's a pretty industrious and already put together winger from the Ontario Hockey League. What are you thinking here with the Canucks and the draft? Do you think it's going to be as simple as best player available? Do you think they're targeting centermen and right shot defensemen? And do you think there's a chance they would take another winger at 11th overall?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's lots of talk about like Reinbacher and what have you at the spot. I do think.
Interestingly, they did not take Reinbacher to dinner, although it's kind of smoke season as well. And so sometimes you might be inclined to show interest in a player to a certain team and not show interest in another player and hide your true feelings. So we should caveat that. Yeah,
and there's Axel sending Pellikka as player that I mean, I try to avoid this game because there's such a long history of yeah, we love this guy, and then that guy was never in consideration.
And that guy was picked sixth, and you never had a chance at him too. There's all like you're taking guys out for dinner maybe that are nowhere going to be near you anyway in the draft. So
yeah, I mean, I wrote a thing 10 days ago about they're basically two guys that they absolutely, if they're still on, either one is still on the table at 11, they should pick. Otherwise, they should slide back because the sort of the value in player between 11 and 19 for the most part isn't a huge difference. And if you can add a pick or you can get off a contract or whatever, which, this is the Blackhawks scenario that we've talked about.
Who are the two players, Patrick?
Well, I wrote about Ryan Leonard and Zach Benson. Now, Leonard's probably going to be gone by the time the Canucks pick. Benson's in that range. It's interesting they took him out because I think there was sort of a feeling you talk to people who kind of, in the industry. I hate that term. Why did I say that?
In the industry?
In the industry. I just don't like it. Scouts, you talk to scouts around and talk to people who sort of sniff these things out. And there's not a sense that the Canucks are very high on Benson because, I don't know, smallish center, I don't know. But guy's super skilled. And it was a scout who essentially came to me and said, there's two guys at 11. If I were the Canucks, and essentially I wrote a story about it, saying these are the guys. And there's some noise. I mean, there's not... I'm now drawing a blank on the Russian kid that everyone's been talking about.
No.
Anyway,
Simashev, the defenseman.
Simashev, thank you. Simashev, which I think, it's interesting how the buzz has kind of bubbled up on him as a guy that, I think everyone thought he's going to be sort of a late first, early second, and now all of a sudden he's in the teens. Partly because, he's a kid who's been playing in the KHL. Like, that means a lot because you don't tend to play in Russia if you're a teenager. But I think, the guys they took out, certainly some of that's going to be, let's pretend we're interested in these guys that we're not interested in. But yeah, I tend to be careful about who they'll actually pick versus who they should pick. And it's clear there are some interesting choices. If they do pick at 11, there will be some interesting choices for sure.
And you said if they pick at 11, they obviously know you're allowed to move down, and we've heard a lot of conjecture about that. What's the probability here? Are we at 50-50, or do you think it's still 80-20 that they make that choice?
I'm interested that you framed it in those sort of odds because I'm actually, 80-20 is my instinct, but I think I could 50-50. I just look at the challenges in front of them, the opportunity to do what they know they need to do and move a contract. Of course, interesting that, the Lafreniere Rangers stuff, which I was sort of talking a little bit about in March, is back. And there's a Garland element to it, apparently, at least according to Arthur Staples. There's clearly options out there. The Canucks are clearly looking at stuff. They were looking at stuff at the deadline. There's something, I think, like I've said, I think there was something there that didn't happen, but they were close to, that was, essentially going to go alongside the Roenick deal. Whether that means actually somehow adding a pick, I just don't see at this point them able to do that.
The trading down thing is good because it allows you to have your cake and eat it too a little bit, in that you get rid of the contract and you still get something to be proud of. It's a little bit further down. If it's the 18th overall draft pick, it's not as good as the 11th. We know how this works. But it's still something to be excited about. It's still something to stock the cupboard with.
Yeah, and they're in a spot in the end that is half their own creation, but inevitably it's a situation they have to deal with.
Yeah.
Whatever the cause. So yeah, you'd rather not trade down at all, but there is all the lesson from basically every other league in the draft is that teams should be willing to move their picks more. They should look at pick value, and NHL teams traditionally have not done that as much. That 11 to 19, yes, there's a slide, but if you're adding whatever the range is, 35, they're 35, right? The second round pick they would be moving, that there's actually quite a bit there. There's a Niels Höglander there, right? Like the Canucks, I would say the fatal flaws, and there are many obviously from the Benning era, but one of the true fatal flaws in the Benning era was how rarely they drafted in the second round, how rarely they got that kind of range of talent. And that's why they have basically no defensemen in the system. That's why they basically have no depth centers in the system. You look at the kinds of guys that go in the second round, there's always interesting players that come at that range, and the Canucks just never pick there. So the ability to add that is is important. And I think a lot about the way Patrick Allvin tried to hype up the Horvat trade. He looked at Aatu Räty and said, listen, here's a guy who's a second-round pick, but he was kind of like a first-round pick, which is obviously the ultimate in spin, but in the end was saying these picks matter. And it is what I tried to ask him, when he traded for Hronek and moved a second-round pick for Hronek. And I said, that's a lot. You like those picks. How hard was that to do? And he didn't really want to talk about it because you knew he didn't want to do that, but he had to, or he felt he had to anyway.
So I have been a draft Nick for decades and across multiple drafts, and I have yet to meet the second round pick whose team did not have him ranked as a first rounder, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Every second round pick.
Yeah, exactly.
We couldn't believe he was there. We had him rated in the first round.
Yeah. I think Judd Brackett literally said when they drafted Höglander, best hands in the draft.
Yeah.
And you're like,
we
okay.
had him rated much higher. He was in our top 20.
We were thrilled.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't believe he was there.
If you have the best anything in the draft, you're probably in the first round. Best shoelaces in the draft.
Hey,
27.
I'm waiting for them to catch up on wingspan. I don't think the top wingspan guy is going in the first round. Skater, at least.
That's tight end stuff. Come on, Matt. That's tight end stuff. What are you talking about?
I'm telling you, that goaltender with the wingspan, the Czech kid, he's going to be a stud. It has been reported, and I think we knew this way back, but it's good to get affirmation. Conor Garland is the player they would prefer to trade. They are shopping him heavily around the National Hockey League, are not finding takers. Frank Saravelli said some teams look at him as a free asset because there isn't going to be anything returning to the Canucks if the acquiring team is taking on the full salary, and may even require a sweetener. So what do you think? Are we getting to a point here with time ticking before the draft and free agency where they just might give away Conor Garland or attach something to him just to clear out $5 million in cap space?
What do they have to attach? That's the real question. There's not a whole
second
lot.
Round picks, buddy. 2025.
Yeah, exactly. I guess. Yeah. That's the thing to remember in all this, and then the reaction that people had to the Damon Severson contract, right? Like 8 years. Well, GMs don't care about year 6, 7, 8. They don't even care about year 4, 5. They care about year 1, 2. And obviously, the Canucks have a number of examples in front of them of exactly that kind of thinking. So yeah, if you're moving if it takes it, I could see it happening at the end of the day. If you means moving a second round pick 2 years from now, yeah, I think every GM, because they always say, well, we can always get that pick back. Garland of the wingers they have that we assume they're willing to move, of which I think there are only 2. Garland has the sort of the most, I think, appeal. Boeser, whatever people think of Boeser, obviously hasn't scored. He's got a bigger contract than Garland. Garland scores at the same rate. I think would be perceived as a better skater, although he isn't like he's never going to be in the race for fastest guy on the team, but he's also not perceived to be slow. At least, Boeser is not a fast skater. We know that. So of your pieces to move, he is the one that has sort of probably the most sort of appeal. I do find myself wondering if there's some sort of scenario where Tyler Myers is appealing to like the Blackhawks because they're like, well, we do need players on our team, and maybe in the right scenario he could help us. He had a pretty good World Championships, but I have a hard time seeing that happening when there are just so many options that don't cost as much as Myers. So yeah, but Garland moving on, the Canucks are in a pickle. Like the problem is theirs, and as I said, however they created it was created. It is their problem. And so as a result, teams are definitely going to be looking around saying, well, we could take advantage of something here. And Garland certainly is appealing. So yeah, the idea that he's essentially a free asset. Yeah. From their perspective, yes, there's going to be a lot of teams going, well, that's your problem. I'm happy to take him. But yeah, I would not expect, just from totally looking from the outside, I would not expect there's going to be huge, the Canucks are going to be gaining picks in a scenario like that. The Chicago thing remains interesting to me. We'll see if anything comes of it. There is in a way, a hockey trade to be made there, because a team like Chicago obviously needs to build a roster. They need to be angling so that they're contending within, the end by the end of Bedard's ELC, and
they also need to make sure they've got a decent line for him to play on at the very least.
Yeah,
I don't think they mind being crappy this year as a whole, but they need to make sure when he's on the ice they're decent.
And that's the thing about Garland, is that, and I would say that would be the one thing for the Canucks where the sort of the disadvantage that they are facing in a lot of these talks kind of goes a little bit out the window, because you look at Chicago, and Chicago would like to add like players who can actually play, and we know Garland can actually play, and he's a player that they would undoubtedly like to have on their roster.
By the way,
the Canucks can say, "Hey, this is a guy you want."
Did we see Bedard's pull-ups? Did you see him effortlessly? He did like 14, 15 pull-ups. Like, remember the guys that couldn't do one? And Bedard, it looked like he could do it with his pinkies, Bedard. That kid is strong. Like, if there's any...
his mom, it doesn't do anything. He's the quietest, calmest kid ever created.
Yeah.
Just only
strong as an ox, too.
And as a result, strong as an ox. Yeah.
All right, last question for you here. The Whitecaps win a Canadian championship on Wednesday. Big crowd at BC, their biggest crowd at BC Place. Sold out show Saturday at Rogers Arena for the UFC, where the Canadian contingent goes 6-0, 7-0, depending on how you want to classify Canadian contingent. And now Saturday, BC Place and the Lions opener in LL Cool J. Mm-hmm. Patrick, we're in events town, buddy. And boy... No, but you tell me, like the last week and a half, this might be our best run since 2010, 2011 in terms of big sporting events, all concentrated and all bringing out big crowds.
I laugh because originally, before the Bear news came out on Friday, I had sort of was going to pick away at a sort of, where's the buzz in this town? It's certainly not the hockey team, because if you look at 10 years ago, there, I went back and looked in archives. What were we talking about 10 years ago at this time? And of course, that was the lockout season. The Canucks had been, knocked out by the Sharks,
right?
And that was Corey Schneider starting, and but like. That was also the end of AV, and all, there were all these questions and things, and like, are they going to really be able to get another year out of this group, and blah 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 blah. And it was the last year Gillis and all this, and now we just sort of go, well, are they going to trade Conor Garland, and can they find some cap space? But yes, the soccer team actually is like playing really well. The football team has buzz to it again. We'll see how long, obviously they don't have Nathan Rourke, but like maybe Vernon Adams will have that.
Did you see Vernon Adams in week 1, buddy?
Yeah.
Did you see him complete the first 21 passes of this year?
That's
both
what I mean. Maybe finally this is the, however many years after he was sort of on the Lions' radar. Maybe he will be that Lions quarterback that always dreamed of.
He's what everybody on CBS Sports Network is talking about.
Yeah,
everybody
exactly.
on CBS Sports.
He's the next coming of Anthony Calvillo. You remember Anthony had those spobbles in Las Vegas and Hamilton, and then turned into the all-time passer,
right? Mm-hmm. And then absolutely. You had the UFC and railings collapsing and. Mm-hmm. No,
please tell me they're going to fix the rest of the infrastructure in the arena for us peons, right? Like, I realize the $100,000 a pop guys are the priority in that news section, but please at least a safe and secure environment.
Don't let us fall on top of each other.
Please just don't have us falling on top of each other by leaning on a rim.
I mean, what do guys like Petey think about that when they see that? Like,
and again, it's not a standalone. Like, the place is crumbling. Yeah.
Well, the place isn't crumbling.
The ice plant, someone told me the ice plant could break and then the ice turns yellow. Like,
I didn't realize how flat the seats now are. There's almost no cushioning left in the bottom of this. They're not very comfortable.
27-year-old seats. 28.
Yeah.
28-year-old seats.
Yeah.
All right.
A lot of beer spilled.
Enjoy the events. We're back to being an event town. Thank you for your time.
Yes.
We'll catch up on Tuesday, and we'll hear you Fridays on Rink Quick.
You can rent the Rug Doctor things and do all the seats. We could do that.
Like from the.
How can
do
you
they
put a
sell the
little
grocery?
bit more cushion?
Safeway.
though?
Yeah.
Need a little more cushioning.
All right, guys, we're gonna get 15 of these, and we're gonna go really fast. See you, boys.
See you, man. That's good.
Tackle all the hills with ease and don't arrive at work all sweaty. Get around the city on electric transportation that fits your lifestyle and get it at bestbuy.ca.